Shalom.
Okay, let's get started.
Below is the title of the article given to Covenant Calendar for scrutiny, and we, finding it very informative, requested permission to use it further for our own research. Again, we thank the original author for permission and access to it. And the original title was The Mystery of the Red Heifer, written by Todd D. Bennett. Is there more information we have not realized? There are many mysteries in Scripture, but one in particular stands out because of the fact that it was thought by the sages that it could not be understood. Indeed, the sages proclaimed that even King Solomon, in all his wisdom, could not understand it. They attribute the following remark as a direct reference to that mystery. I said I would be wise, but it is far from me. And that's written in Ecclesiastes 7:23. The command is the one involving what is commonly called the red heifer or the red cow sacrifice. It is now time to investigate the how and why of every detail and how this red heifer study is going to link to Joshua's sickle, specifically on the fact of whether or not Yahushua was clean or unclean upon his resurrection. As some Enoch calendar people claim, Yahushua was unclean, and therefore the wave sheaf needed to be delayed a full week for him to go through this cleansing ceremony before presenting himself as the wave sheaf and the backbone or the etzem of the plan of salvation. So yes, this has a direct link to the study of Joshua's sickle. This study will explore this mystery, demonstrating how this is no longer a mystery. Through the Ruach, this study will show how the wonderful commands around the red heifer is all about the plan of restoration, envisioned and portrayed through the covenant process, accomplished through Yahushua HaMashiach. Let's begin with some scriptures, and these scriptures will be taken from the Scriptures edition. The Torah command for the red heifer. And Yahuah spoke to Moshe and to Aharon, saying, This is the law of the Torah, which Yahuah has commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring you a red heifer, a perfect one, in which there is no blemish, on which a yoke has never come. And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and he shall bring it outside the camp, and shall slaughter it before him. And Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times towards the front of the tent of meeting. Why this positioning? And I want you to pay attention to that, to the front of the tent of meeting. Very, very important. And the heifer shall be burned before his eyes. He burns its hide and its flesh and its blood and its dung. And the priest shall take the cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet, and throw them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer. Please note the scarlet, the pink emphasis on that word scarlet. This is what this study is going to really, really concentrate on. The priest shall then wash his garments, and shall bathe his body in water, and afterward come into the camp. But the priest is unclean until evening. And he who is burning it washes his garments in water, and shall bathe his body in water, and is unclean until evening. And a clean man shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and shall place them outside the camp in a clean place. And they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel, for the water for uncleanness. It is for cleansing from sin. And he who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his garments, and is unclean until evening. And it shall be a law forever to the children of Israel, and to the stranger who sojourns in their midst. And here's a summary of Numbers 19, the Torah command. This command was given to Moshe and Aharon. Aharon was the high priest at the time, and this is demonstrating that Moshe was not acting as the high priest, but likely overseeing each action to be sure the Torah commands were followed. And number 3, The unblemished sacrifice must be led from the tabernacle. I'm going to say that again. The unblemished sacrifice must be led from the tabernacle to a place outside the camp. That from the tabernacle is going to be very interesting. I think it's in part 2, but I want to stress that. The unblemished sacrifice must have originated from the tabernacle. Number 4, this was to be done by Eleazar, the son of Aharon, his name meaning El helps. Why Eleazar? Was Aaron disqualified because of his involvement with the golden calf at Sinai? Was Eleazar symbolic of the non-priesthood rabble Yahudim that crucified Yahusha? Aharon was soon to die. This sacrifice was intended to be a one-time event. Did Yahuah intend for only one red heifer sacrifice prior to when Yahusha arrived to fulfill all the sacrifices of completion? The fact that Eleazar was specifically named, rather than this being a task prescribed to the high priest, could mean that it was only intended to be a one-time event, specifically allocated to Eleazar. And I want to emphasize, please note the possibility only. Consider this. We know from history that there was only one red heifer sacrifice up until the time of the destruction of the Temple of Babylon. And please note that Todd Bennett does not give reference for this history. And I know there is a lot of conflicting information on that. So I just want you to know that that is a question. Eleazar was not the one who killed the sacrifice. That was left to the other one. And the reason? Eleazar was to be looking at the face of the sacrifice when it was killed. Eleazar then took the blood, sprinkled it 7 times toward the tabernacle, or the tent of appointment. The blood was the path to enter for salvation. In the place of sacrifice, outside the camp, designated by the boundary line of Jerusalem's city limits. And those limits were designated at the appointed altar. It was this place where the blood was sprinkled toward the tabernacle. Was this a demonstration that this was the starting point of the blood trail that would lead to the house of Yahuah? While burning, the priest would cast cedar wood, scarlet, and the hyssop into the fire. Note the scarlet. The issue of being unclean. Both the priest and the other one became unclean from their participation in this process. And the next requirement for being unclean, both are required to immerse themselves and their clothes in water. How long did they remain unclean? Verse 8 declares, and shall be unclean until the even, and that even is Erev. Next, another individual who is a clean person gathers the ashes and places them in a clean place. Where? Outside the camp. Now, these clean people that do the work, this clean person, is very significant and will come into play farther down. The one gathering the ashes also became unclean in the process. They would then have to follow the instruction to become clean as the priest and the one who did the sacrificing. An interesting mystery. The ashes remain clean, even though everyone, 3 people, in the process becomes unclean. These ashes are kept in a clean place. What are the ashes for? These ashes are kept in a clean place and are for the waters of purification, or literally, water nidah. What is the meaning of nidah in this study? Nidah is typically associated with a woman's monthly cycle. This is a time when man and woman must separate and not have relations. The woman is deemed unclean because of her blood flow. It is a vital part of her remaining fertile or fruitful. To be cleansed from her nadah, she must immerse in water. How are the ashes of the red heifer connected to this woman? By calling the ashes mixed with water the nadah waters, an association is being made with the preparation of a woman to restore intimate relations with her husband. See Bethula the bride, us, to be married to Yahusha. The first recorded miracle of Yahusha occurred at the wedding feast in Cana. This is a significant miracle for several reasons. Most believe he simply turned the water into wine because there was a need. Is there something else we need to consider? Of significance, this wedding feast occurred on the third day, John 2:1. It was this third day that he instructed the attendants to fill 6 stone water pots with water, and that would be the third day of the year. These 6 stone pots were designated for waters of purification, John 2:6, waters mixed with the ashes from the red heifer. One of the uses would be for a woman to clean or to cleanse from her nadah. The stone pots were empty. Why? Likely because the bride had just prepared herself for the wedding. Yahusha used those vessels designated for waters of purification to turn water into wine. Is that of any significance? Yes. At the Last Supper, only a few hours from his death, he indicated that the wine was his blood. This relates directly to the red heifer sacrifice. Recall that the blood must remain within the red heifer during the sacrifice. This sacrifice was for the purification of his people. You'll find that in Numbers 19:9. The last command of the red heifer instructions. And it shall be unto the children of Israel, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among them, for a statute forever. This is a command through the ages, olam. It is meant for the children of Israel and the stranger who dwells among them, or for anyone who intended to dwell in the land. The placement of the red heifer instructions is interesting. Why? This command is couched between the instructions concerning the tithes to the Levites and the high priest, which was finished at the cross, and the instructions concerning dead bodies, having to wash for becoming unclean, not necessary after the cross. Interesting note, Aharon's death is described after this commandment. Another unique point of the red heifer sacrifice. The location of this sacrifice in the Torah text is quite unique and appears to revolve around the first fruit and offerings belonging to those who served in the house of Yahuah. The sacrifice is definitely connected with purification and cleansing. The timing of this command is also interesting. This was not a command given at Sinai, but given in the wilderness, a book of the law command. And that would be after the children had rejected the land, their entrance, and shortly before Aharon's death. So what is the significance of this? The children of Israel are wandering in the wilderness. Where? Outside the camp, waiting for a tainted generation to die off, so the next generation, the clean people, could enter in. Why is there no red heifer sacrifice commanded in the 2,550 years before this time? Because of the placement of when the instructions were given for the red heifer sacrifice, it stands out in its uniqueness even more. Scripture does have a few instances referring to heifer, but only one instance of a red heifer. Where is that instance found? And here is Yahuah's covenant with Abram in Genesis 15. The covenant made with Abraham after he left Babylon and crossed over into the land of promise. Yahuah gave Abram a great promise of land and seed. Abram wanted proof of the promise. Yahuah confirmed his word through an ancient blood covenant ritual involved designated sacrifices that would be cut in half. This was an ancient suzerain type of covenant and was recognized by Abraham as the absolute authority of that era. That is why Yahuah met him where he was with this type of covenant. All participants of the blood covenant were each supposed to walk through the channel of blood between the slaughterings. This was symbolic of the death penalty for breaking the covenant. Genesis 15:9, and he said unto them, take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Heifer, the word there is H5697, eglah, and it is the feminine portion of H5695, a female calf, and especially one nearly grown heifer. Heifer as eglah, or a female calf or cow, and the first mention of heifer is 3 years old, as are the goat and ram. Note, the heifer or eglah was the first of the slaughterings involved in the covenant process, the first one to be done. After Abram prepared the sacrifices, he was placed in a deep sleep likened to death. While in this state, or trance, he experienced horror and great darkness. During this time, fire and smoke, and that is the burning furnace, passed through the blood. This relates to Yahuah's leading and protecting Yisrael. He is the one that will take the penalty for breaking the covenant, the penalty of death, as Abram was not even involved. The blood of a heifer was the first blood of the covenant with Abram. The heifer was the entry point into that path of blood, the covenant path. This covenant involved a promise that Abram would have seed and land. Later, Yahuah made a covenant with Abram and changed his name to Abraham. He commanded Abraham to be circumcised and promised him with the following, Genesis 17:6, and I will make thee exceedingly fruitful. Note that word fruitful, it's going to be coming up. I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. Note, this was not a brand new covenant, but rather an extension of the previous covenant. Abraham was now prepared to further fulfill the covenant through a new name and the mark of circumcision in his flesh. Through the cutting of the flesh and the shedding of his blood, he would bear the sign. It was literally through that sign that the promised seed would pass into the womb of Sarah. From Sarah would come the promised son, Yitzhak, that Abraham would later be told to slaughter. The text states that Abraham would be exceedingly fruitful. The Hebrew word for fruitful is parah. Abraham was promised that he would be an incredibly fruitful man. This will prove to be important as we look further at the red heifer study. Is the Genesis 15 heifer of 3 years, is it different than the red heifer of Numbers 19? Note these points. Every instance involving a heifer uses the term eglah, except for Numbers 19, which refers to a red heifer. In Numbers 19, the Hebrew words read parah adamah. In comparison, the Hebrew will not read eglah. Two different words, very, very definite reasons for these. Difference between parah adamah and eglah. This is the first clue. There is something deep and mysterious concerning this unique sacrifice of the red heifer. Instead of eglah being translated as heifer, we read parah, which is the same word used to describe Abraham. The word parah, which is translated as heifer, clearly means fruitful, according to all Hebrew lexicons. This was also the case regarding the blessing promised to Abraham, to be fruitful, or parah. There are variations of the word that are used to refer to cows, such as the parot in Pharaoh's dream that Joseph interpreted. The word parot is actually the plural form of the word parah, since there were 7 cows in the dream. The word parah can mean cow. It is not a term exclusively used to refer to a female cow, although it is clearly defined as being fruitful. The word parah is associated with Egypt and Joseph. It was in Egypt that Joseph flourished. Prior to his death, Israel spoke prophetic words and blessings over all his sons. The first words spoken over Joseph were Genesis 49:22. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. Many translations describe Joseph as a fruitful bough, but in Hebrew it reads perot ben. The word ben is literally son. Joseph is emphatically described as a fruitful son. That would make him a very fruitful man, just like Abraham. How does all this information compare to the red heifer? The mysterious red heifer is known as parah, or fruitful, adamah. The word adamah means ground. Note the connection with the first man, Adam, who was specifically named after the origin of his being, the ground. Adam was literally formed from the dust of the ground. The word for dust is afar, which also means ashes. So Adam was actually taken from the ashes of the ground. Please keep in mind, the red heifer was transformed into ashes. Clearly, there is a connection with man and the red heifer's sacrifice. Is there also a connection from the red heifer to Yahushua HaMashiach? Number 5, the word Adam means man. When looking closer, the word dam means blood. Therefore, the emphasis of this sacrifice is clearly on the blood itself, not the color. And we're going to be digging into this a lot deeper in the next 2 parts. The emphasis of this sacrifice is clearly on the blood, not the color. And ultimately, it is the blood contained within Adam that being man, not the blood of an animal, that is being emphasized. And I know these are some strong statements right now, but this information is going to be brought out. Is dam actually referencing the skin on the heifer? Is dam actually referencing the color of the skin of the heifer? And if you look there, you'll see the two words in the red square, adame. I should read it the other way. It's supposed to go right to left. Heifer adame. Adame, H122, is translated to us as red. Dam, H1818, inside this word is translated to us as blood. The question is the word dam, which is blood, is that a real description of dam? I'm going to ask this again. The word dam, and being given to us as blood, is that a real description of dam? And I ask you that for a very specific reason. Just keep that in the back of your mind for now. We must remember that Hebrew is an action-based language. What if dam describes a continuous action that occurs within the heifer? What implication to salvation would this action contain? And to whom would it indicate? Could it be that the blood is that which accomplishes dam? Please note the terminology in that question. I'm going to read it again. Could it be that the blood is that which accomplishes dam? Something to think about. In part 2, we will be digging deeper into dam. In Hebrew, it is an action word, yet in English, we are given a noun, blood. Maybe, just maybe, we are missing something that has been veiled. What is the result of all this surrounding the word Adamah? The emphasis on the blood, the word Adamah, is used in describing the red heifer, has often been translated as red. That is a problematic translation because the color associated with Adamah is more likely brown. The word is also the root in the word translated as ruddy. Interestingly, David was specifically described as ruddy in 1 Samuel 16:12 and 1 Samuel 17:42. Adamah is also associated with Nazarite sons of Zion, described in Lamentations 4:7 as, her Nazarites were purer than snow, they were whiter than milk, they were more ruddy in body than rubies. Their polishing was of sapphire. That's from the KJV. Therefore, the phrase para adamah literally means fruitful ground and can also be a fruitful, ruddy man. It is directly linked to the fruitful individuals such as Adam, Joseph, and David. And it is also associated with the beloved bridegroom and Nazarites. Upon examining these relationships, the connection with our Messiah cannot be ignored. For Messiah has ascribed such titles as the second Adam, the son of Joseph, the son of David, and the bridegroom. This heifer sacrifice is definitely pointing to the Messiah. But wait, there is more. All of what has been discovered is made even clearer with an examination of the Hebrew text and the existence of the Aleph Tav, the mysterious untranslated word found throughout the scriptures that always points to the Messiah. Yahushua specifically identified himself with the Aleph Tav. The Aleph in Paleo represents the head of a cow, power and strength. The Tav in Paleo represents the mark, or a covenant. By simply looking at the Paleo, it is easy to see a connection made between the Aleph Tav and the red heifer. We're going to look at Numbers 19:5. The description of the burning of the red heifer in modern Hebrew looks like this. Okay, let's first read the English. Numbers 19:5. And the heifer shall be burned before his eyes, and he burns its hide, and its flesh, and its blood, and its dung. So when you go to those highlighted boxes, that is where you will see the Aleph Tav, H853, the Aleph Tav. In modern Hebrew, the Aleph Tav appears as, you'll see the letters there, the flame Hebrew. In Paleo, notice the Aleph Tav is directly connected to the para, or the fruitful. The Aleph Tav is directly connected to the ara, the skin. And the Aleph Tav is directly connected to the besar, or the flesh. And again, directly connected to the dam, the blood. The Aleph Tav is connected to all these. That should be a very, very good clue about who this red heifer is connected to. The Aleph Tav. The Mashiach is connected to the fruitful, to the skin, to the flesh, to the blood. Every one of these identities points directly to the Mashiach. Every one of these identities from the red heifer. Very, very strong linkage there. Every part of the being of this sacrifice is connected with the Aleph Tav. Once it is understood that the Aleph Tav represents the Messiah, this strongly indicated that the Messiah would come as a sacrifice in the form of flesh and blood. This one small passage, Numbers 19:5, is a small example of the presence of the Aleph Tav that is found throughout the commandment and the entire Torah, although it is only seen in the Paleo Hebrew. Why would the red heifer be associated with the Messiah like this? To answer the question, let's go back to the garden, where there was a sacrifice at the door of the garden as Adam and Eve were covered with skins on that day. They were banished east of Eden and sent outside the camp. East of Eden and outside the camp, which represented the place that Yahuah had dwelled with man. If we understood that the tabernacle, the tent of Yahuah, represented the garden, and Jerusalem represented Eden, we can easily see the pattern. The solution was to cleanse men outside the camp, where he had been banished to the east. Just as the sun rises in the east, so Yahuah brings his deliverance from the east. It is at that place, the place of the appointed altar on the Mount of Olives, that the sacrifice for cleansing would take place. And you see that in Ezekiel 43:21. This truth is reinforced through the various articles included while the cow was being burned. Along with that Holocaust, the whole burnt offering there was also cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet. Scarlet, a most interesting word. These articles were burned with the red heifer and became part of the ashes. Yahuah's perfect, absolute, necessary Holocaust. The red heifer was not a completed sacrifice unless accompanied by 3 other ingredients. The significance of these simple 3 items is amazing. The first ingredient, cedar wood, or etz eraz. Wood, which is not cedar in Strong's, is 6086, and it's a tree from its firmness, hence wood, and sticks in the plural. Cedar was one of the most noble trees. Cedar, H730, Erez, a cedar tree from the tenacity of its roots. You see, that's a different word there. Erez, 730. King David dwelled in a house of cedar, 2 Samuel 7:2. In King Solomon's temple, cedar was the prevalent wood. No stones were seen, 1 Kings 6:18. And the cedar of the house within was carved with knops and open flowers. All was cedar. There was no stone seen. Cedar beautified the interior, but not the floor. The floor that was walked upon was made from cypress, 1 Kings 6:15. And he built the walls of the house within the boards of the cedar, both the floor of the house and the walls of the ceiling. And he covered them on the inside with wood, and covered the floor of the house with planks of fir. And the New King James has that as cypress. Cedar is special, being associated with the house of Yahuah. Why? Cedar is particularly interesting because it is a very unique wood, or etz, meaning wood, tree, stick. But how about these ones? Branch, rod, or shoot, out of the same word, etz. Does that make a connection to the cedar going into the red heifer sacrifice? Can we find Yahusha in those 3 words, branch, rod, and shoot? Remember, there are many prophecies referring to the Messiah as a branch, a rod, and a shoot. The cedar is also connected with the hyssop, and that is the next ingredient in the sacrificial ritual. The second ingredient, the hyssop. Of all the things that Solomon spoke of in his wisdom, notice 1 Kings 4:33, and he spake of trees, from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. While the cedar was great, the hyssop was small. Even though small, this lowly shrub has a vital role in the scriptures. Hyssop is often associated with cleansing. Psalm 51:7, purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Other areas where hyssop is used, cleansing of leprous people or items. Hyssop is combined with scarlet and cedar wood at the very beginning stages of the elaborate ritual involved for cleansing leprous individuals and homes. Hyssop, scarlet, and cedar wood. The cleansing aspect of these ingredients cannot be ignored, nor can the connection between the red heifer and the cleansing be ignored, using cedar, hyssop, and scarlet. While the blood of the red heifer is sprinkled 7 times toward the house of Yahuah, the leper and the leprous house are also sprinkled 7 times. Why 7 times? What is the significance of these 7 times? We're going to look at that later on. They needed to be healed and sprinkled with the cleansing waters. The Passover ritual. A, The first mention of hyssop is in Exodus 12 for the Passover requirements. The hyssop was dipped in the shed blood of the Passover lamb. The blood was applied to the lintel and the doorposts of the house with hyssop. And the result? The blood applied by the hyssop secured the redemption and protection of the firstborn. Together, they symbolized a cleansing effect. The general cleansing. Hyssop is used to apply the waters of purification that are made from the ashes of the red heifer. This mixture of ashes and water is specifically to cleanse and a purification from sin, Numbers 19:9. This mixture also cleanses from the taint of death. Might this mixture of red heifer ashes and water symbolize exactly Yahushua's mission for this earth? Could it also be said that he would cleanse us from the taint of death? Next one down. A clean person must hold the hyssop and sprinkle the unclean person. Therefore, the hyssop is a conduit for transferring the protective and cleansing blood, as well as the water. This establishes a clear connection between the cleansing power of the water and the blood. We might do well here to remember the blood and water that poured forth from Yahushua's side with the spear from the Roman guard. The blood was for redemption. The water was for cleansing. The hyssop also connects the red heifer sacrifice with the Passover sacrifice, and most importantly, the Passover sacrifice of our Messiah. We are now ready to examine the third ingredient, the scarlet thread. Scarlet is a very special color, being one of the predominant colors in the tabernacle tapestries, along with blue and purple. And in part 3, we're going to learn a lot more about scarlet. Number 2, it is found all throughout the interior of the tent of Yahuah, as well as the doors, veils, screens, and gates. Number 3, it is also found in the garments of the high priest. The Hebrew word for scarlet is shani. Remember, every Hebrew letter has a numeric value, and every word also has a numeric value, because there is no separate numbering system in Hebrew. That word shani, interesting. Gematria is the study of examining the numerical values of words. The word shani, or shani, has the numeric value of 360. Does this ring a bell? Is there any connections with the number 360 to our Creator? This 360 is giving the sense of completion or a cycle. That is the root word. Up there you see shani. Question. Shani, a masculine noun, directly connects to Yahuah's 360-degree day Shane. That is his Tekufah circuit-based years. Why then is Shani directly connected to the Coccus ilicis, which is the female worm which devoured Jonah's shade vine? For those of you who do not know about this Coccus ilicis, the worm with Jonah, if you haven't seen the talk on that, you are going to love this when it comes along. I'm thinking that's in part 3, though. It is fabulous, and we have to thank Charlene for bringing that out. So this Shani directly connects to the 360-degree Shani year and to Yahushua. thoughts here to ponder. What would your thoughts be if scriptural evidences expose direct linkage of this female worm to Yahusha? But I thought Yahusha was male. How can he be linked to a female worm? Wow, very interesting information coming on this in the future. Very, very good. Whoops, pressed the button too many times. Number 3, is this not profound since Yahuah clearly operates in 360-degree cycles? The Enochian and lunar years are simply unable to fulfill consistent 360-degree Shanae worship cycles. And yes, they have to be a perfect circuit. Is this Shanae, or Shani, which is scarlet, and has the value of 360, is this not profound, as this is the red heifer sacrifice and it points to a future fulfillment? Would this future fulfillment necessarily involve a 360-degree, 360-cycle year to facilitate a 1,260-day, 42-month, 3.5-year prophecy being completed for our salvation? Linkage here, people. Linkage. There's lots of linkage with this red heifer study. Further investigation of Shani and related family words with scriptural examples. Number 1, the second day. The first time this word is used in scripture is Genesis 1:8 as the word second for the second day. The root word is H3138. Second, as H8145, means to double. Shane, double. And year, as 8141, is linked to the noun year. But do note H8144, as this is linked to scarlet and the insect. An interesting connection. Back to Jonah's worm once again. And all this is going to pull together. It's going to take a while, but all this comes together. Second, 8145, Shani, from 8138, properly double. If you do not have a second identity that is absolutely identical to the first, how can it be double? If it's not identical, it is not double. And refer that to the calendar of the lunar years and the Shanae years. And yet, this word Shani goes right back to the red heifer sacrifice. Shani, double. Second, also adverbally, again, or the second time. H8138, Shana, a primitive root to fold, duplicate, by implication to transmute, to do, again, alter or double, do the second time. Year, 8141, Shanae, and that is in plural only. And feminine would be Shana, and that is from 8138, a year, as a revolution of time. That is referencing the year. Scarlet, H8144, Shani, of uncertain derivation. Crimson, properly, the insect or its color. Also, stuff dyed with it. Crimson and scarlet. Number 2, the scarlet thread. The first time a family word of Shani is used as scarlet is Genesis 38, when it refers to a scarlet thread that was tied to the wrist of Zerah, one of the twins of Judah and Tamar. Remember, Zerah thrust his fist out of Tamar first, and a scarlet thread was tied to his wrist. He then withdrew his hand, and his brother Perez came out. The child Zerah that came out second was actually the first to be completely revealed, and the one that the Messiah would come through. Genesis 38:30, and you'll see that in Matthew chapter 1 also. The Scarlet Cord. The Scarlet Cord. This theme continues with the scarlet cord that was placed in the window of Rahab. This scarlet cord was a sign of her faith and of her salvation, as she and her family were spared the judgment rendered upon Jericho by Yahuah and the children of Israel under the command of Joshua. Joshua 2:18. Behold, when we come into the land, thou shalt bind this line of scarlet thread in the window that thou didst let us down by, and thou shalt bring thy father and thy mother and thy brethren and all thy father's house home unto thee. Rahab also became an ancestress of Yahushua, our Messiah, because of that scarlet cord. Have a look here, Matthew 1:5-6. Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. Obed begot Jesse. 6, and Jesse begot David the king. I should say verse 6. That number 6 should not be emphasized there. Oh well. Cleansing for skin diseases and comparison between the scapegoat and released bird being connected to the scarlet yarn. If they have been healed of their defiling skin disease, the priest shall order that 2 live clean birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop be brought for the person to be cleansed. Then the priest shall order that one of the birds shall be killed over fresh water in a clay pot. He is then to take the live bird, and he is to release the live bird in the open fields. The released bird, like the scapegoat, was sent away carrying the impurity, the stain. Here it is in Leviticus 14:3-7. If the leprosy is healed in the leper, then the priest shall command to take for him who is to be cleansed 2 living and clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds shall be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. As for the living bird, he shall take it, the cedar wood, and the scarlet, and the hyssop, and dip them with the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and he shall let the living bird loose in the open field. Leviticus 16:7-10. Then Aaron shall cast lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for Yahuah, and the other lot for the scapegoat. And Aharon shall bring the goat on which Yahuah's lot fell, and offer it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before Yahuah, to make atonement upon it, and to let it go as the scapegoat into the wilderness. And we learned a lot about the scapegoat this morning. Thank you very much to Walter Shopey, who had some very, very clear instruction on that. Thank you, Walter. The summary. The scarlet thread has great messianic significance, as do all of the ingredients. The scarlet thread, coupled with the great cedar wood and the lowly hyssop, provides a very clear picture of how everything links and points to Yahushua as the Messiah. The red heifer sacrifice was intended for the entire congregation. It was provided in order to allow people to be clean and dwell within the assembly. If a person was not made clean by the waters of purification that resulted from the sacrifice, then they would remain outside the assembly. Without it, there would be no assembly in the camp. So this sacrifice made outside the camp was intended to bring those outside the assembly into the assembly and ultimately into the house. And that would be the house of Yahushua. In other words, restoration, complete restoration. How does this link to Joseph? The cleansing with the ashes of the heifer was something done for Israel, with a particular emphasis on Joseph, because it is a fruitful, there's that word parah, it is a fruitful sacrifice. The tribal emblem for Joseph, particularly Ephraim, was a cow. Where will Ephraim lead Israel? The first note. The house of Israel, under the leadership of Ephraim, suffered from a special problem stemming from their worship of a cow. The children of Israel had whored after the cow god of Egypt at Sinai. This separated them from Yahuah and excluded them from entering the house. This worship of a cow is going to become very, very significant when connected to the red heifer and connected to Moshe. It is going to become very, very clear in the end of part 3. Note, after the kingdom of Israel was divided, following Solomon's death, again, the northern 10 tribes whored after the cow god of Egypt by setting up 2 golden calves and offering sacrifices to that god. The house of Israel, led by Ephraim, whored after the other gods and was an unfaithful wife. As a result, the house of Israel was exiled, sent out of the camp, and actually given a certificate of divorce by Yahuah. Isaiah 51. Thus saith Yahuah, where is the bill of your mother's divorcement, whom I have put away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities have ye sold yourselves, and for your transgressions is your mother put away. And Jeremiah 3:8, and I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away, and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. Third note. Receiving a bill of divorcement posed a problem for the house of Israel because the Torah forbids remarriage to an adulterous wife. Deuteronomy 24, 1-4. When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she found no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanliness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, and giveth it in her hand, and sendeth her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife, after that she is defiled. For that is an abomination before Yahuah, and thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which Yahuah thy Elohim giveth thee for an inheritance. So now we come to Joseph. Joseph is now outside the camp. Even though Joseph was outside the camp, it was prophesied that he would return. This is the reason why Yahushua came as the suffering servant known as the Messiah ben Joseph. He specifically said that he came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, or he came to prepare the way for the unfaithful bride through his blood. Is the mystery of the red heifer going to be revealed? This whole Testament story, this whole Old Testament story was part of the mystery hidden in the red heifer sacrifice. While the bitter waters bring a curse and destroy the fruitfulness of a woman that has defiled herself and behaved unfaithfully, Numbers 5, the waters of purification mixed with the ashes of the red heifer make one clean. Remember, those waters are called Nidah waters, unmistakably revealing their purpose: to make the unclean, leprous, and the dead house of Israel alive and clean once again. This is how the dry bones of the house of Israel will come back to life, and it has everything to do with resurrection. Was Joseph favored? Will that be to his favor? Yes, Joseph was the favored son of Jacob and Rachel. His two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, were actually adopted by their grandfather Israel, or Yaakov. They both became the sons of Israel. Ephraim, the youngest, was elevated to firstborn status. Ephraim is often referenced as the representative of the tribe of Joseph and the entire house of Israel. Jeremiah 31:15-22 has a promise of hope for this situation. Let's read it. Jeremiah 31:15. Thus saith Yahuah, a voice was heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children because they are no more. Thus saith Yahuah, hold back your voice from your weeping and your eyes from tears, for there is a reward for your work, declares Yahuah, and they shall return from the land of the enemy. Verse 17, and there is expectancy for your latter end, declares Yahuah, and your children shall return to their own country. Verse 18, I have clearly heard Ephraim lamenting, you have chastised me, and I was chastised, like an untrained calf. Turn me back, and I shall turn back, for you are Yahuah, my Elohim. After my turning back, I repented, and after I was instructed, I struck myself on the thigh. I was ashamed, even humiliated, for I bore the reproach of my youth. Is Ephraim a precious son to me, a child of delights? For though I spoke against him, I still remembered him. That is why my affections were deeply moved for him. I have great compassion for him, declares Yahuah. Set up signposts, make landmarks, set your heart towards the highway, the way in which you went. Turn back, O maiden of Israel, turn back to these cities of yours. Till when would you turn here and there, O backsliding daughter? For Yahuah has created what is new on earth. A woman encompasses a man. He was chastised as a bullock, unaccustomed to the yoke. Ephraim is likened to an unyoked calf or egal. This reveals the connection with the red heifer. A sacrifice was needed to restore the relationship between Yahuah and Ephraim when Ephraim, the son, repents. Then the house of Israel can be deemed a virgin when she repents. Then she returns to a clean state when she has been cleansed from her condition of nidah. It is then that she can become the bride. And how will this come about? Yahuah will do this through a renewed thing. This is exactly what Joseph needed. Because of the calf of the house of Israel, Joseph was outside the camp. He needed to be cleansed from the taint of death, sprinkled with the waters of purification from the sacrifice of the fruitful man, Yahushua, our Messiah. In Ezekiel 36:22-23, it proclaims to the house of Israel, about Joseph, "Therefore say unto the house of Israel, Thus saith Yahuah your Elohim, I do not this for your sakes, O house of Israel, but for mine holy name's sake, which ye have profaned among the heathen, whither ye went. And I will sanctify my great name, which was profaned among the heathen, which ye have profaned in the midst of them. And the heathen shall know that I am Yahuah, saith the Master Yahuah, when I shall be sanctified in you before their eyes. For I will take you from among the heathen, and gather you out of all countries, and will bring you into your land. Then I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean from all your filthiness, from all your idols will I cleanse you. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and will give you an heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes, and ye shall keep my judgments, and do them. And ye shall dwell in the land that I give to your fathers, and ye shall be my people, and I will be your Elohim. I will also save you from all your uncleanness. And I will call for the corn, and will increase it, and will lay no famine upon you. And I will multiply the fruit of the tree, and the increase of the field, that ye shall receive no more reproach of famine among the heathen. Then shall ye remember your own evil ways, and your doings that were not good, and shall loathe yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and for your abominations. Not for your sakes do I this, saith Master Yahuah. Be it known unto you, be ashamed and confounded for your own ways, O house of Israel. Thus saith Master Yahuah, in the day that I shall have cleansed you from all your iniquities, I will also cause you to dwell in the cities, and the wastes shall be builded. Yahuah says he is going to cleanse us from our iniquities. What was it, the purpose of that red heifer? It was to cleanse us from our sins. Are the mysteries of this cleansing red heifer sacrifice becoming clear? The house of Israel needed this cleansing provision outside the camp because this is where Joseph is located. The only way to be restored is to be cleansed. The house of Israel will someday be regathered, cleansed, and restored back to the land. This will be accomplished by Yahushua, not man. The blood of this important sacrifice was sprinkled toward the door, so that, once purified, he can enter the land and approach the house. Where was the red heifer sacrifice presented? The red heifer sacrifice was not presented in the house. Why? Because it was not meant for Yahuah, as all other sacrifices in the courtyard were. The red heifer already belonged to Yahuah because it originated in his house. The red heifer was removed from the house and taken outside the camp because it was intended for those who found themselves outside the camp, unable to approach his house. Sinners outside the camp or outside the covenant and in need of Yahusha's intercessory mediation option. That is the reason for the red heifer sacrifice. Review of offerings made on his altar in the courtyard. Any offering for Yahuah was made on his altar. That person offering the sacrifice must be clean, and no one became unclean by offering their sacrifice. This was not so for the red heifer, as we now know. The red heifer was unique. It was perfect and unblemished. Everything about the process reveals that the sacrifice itself was clean. It was originally in the house. It was inspected and found to be clean, unblemished, a perfect one. Does this remind us of Yahusha? It had to be clean because it could not defile the tabernacle that was kudosh, or set apart. Remember, it is the blood of this sacrifice that is the emphasis, not the color of the animal. And we're going to dig into this more in part 2. It is the blood of the sacrifice, not the color of the animal, that becomes very important. By constantly referring to this sacrifice by color, the red cow or red heifer, the focus is misplaced. Remember, man was called Adam because of the blood, dam, that flowed through his veins. Despite the fact that he was blood-colored, he was made in the image of Yahuah. It is the blood that is important. The blood alone leads to the house. The blood burned and mixed with the flesh and other ingredients of cedar, hyssop, and scarlet thread is what then became the ashes. It is the ashes that then provide the cleansing when mixed with water. The ashes of the sacrifices burned in the temple service were removed from the altar and kept in a clean place. The ashes of the red heifer removed from the Mifkad altar were collected and stored and mixed with water. The word for ashes is Heifer, and that is H665. As a noun, Heifer, the small ashes or dust into which the fuel is broken by the action of the fire. This H665 word references the ashes from the red heifer sacrifice that pertains directly to the clean man, gathering the remains of the ashes, which was ultimately comprised of very symbolic materials, symbolic of Yahusha, and note the Aleph, which indicates a Kodosh or Kodesh affiliation. Now, let's look at the next word used for ashes in Numbers 19:17. Is there a difference? Numbers 19:17, ashes. 6083, afar. From OT 6080, dust, as powdered or gray, hence clay, earth, mud. The KJV uses it as ashes, dust, earth, ground, mortar, powder, and rubbish. This H6083 word is used to directly reference when the unclean person was to use this cleansing water, the ash mixture, for purification purposes. So there's a very clear difference in these words and what the usage is. These red heifer ashes were kept in a clean place outside the camp. Interestingly, both instances where the ashes are mentioned in the sacrificial process, the word Epher is preceded by the Aleph Tav, a clear messianic reference. That's unmistakable. We cannot mistake that. So the Messiah is connected with those ashes, just as the first Adam came from ashes. What paved the way to the tabernacle? It was the blood that paved the way to the tabernacle, the house, while the ashes remained outside the camp. That was where the unclean were located. Why is this so significant? This is a vivid example of the work of our Messiah. He was outside the camp, healing the unclean and raising the dead. An example: in one instance of healing, he sent the healed leper to the priests to undergo the ritual sent forth in the Torah. This was a rare event and surely should have notified the priests that the Messiah had come. Why? In those days, many anticipated a Messiah who would cleanse them from their sins. Daniel 12:10 includes a reference to the red heifer sacrifice. Many shall be purified and made white and tried and made white. Why is that emphasized, made white? Can this be directly connected to that worm? What worm? How about that worm that ate that vine that Jonah was getting shade from? Could it be that worm? Could it be that worm that Yahushua in the Old Testament referenced himself to? Could it be? That's coming up, part 3. This is reflected by Yahushua's word in Revelation 1:5, which states that Yahushua washed us from our sins in his own blood. It is not the color of his skin that cleanses, i.e., the red heifer. The elect are also described in Revelation 7:14 as the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. According to 1 John 1:7, the blood of Yahushua cleanses us from all sin. So let's sum it up. The fruitful son of Yahuah, the firstborn, was made to cleanse from sin. This was specifically the purpose of the waters mixed with the ashes. And why a worm? What does that worm have to do with white? And what is the connection? Sins washed white as snow. Is there a connection? Absolutely. Yahushua came and died almost 2,000 years ago, slaughtered outside the camp like the red heifer in order to purify the people. He was rejected by most of the Yahudim, and like a lamb led to the slaughter, he did not open his mouth, but let them kill him in accordance to the prophecies. Isaiah 53:7, Daniel 7:9, or Daniel 9:27. Some interesting thoughts on the red heifer sacrifice. This sacrifice only cleanses people in order to get them inside the camp, which represents the kingdom. There is still the issue of getting into the house. Because of the sin involving another cow, the golden calf of Sinai, only the Levites were permitted to serve in the house. It was the Levites only in Exodus 32:26 and 28 who chose to stand on the side of Yahuah and Moshe to bring justice to the camp when the evil of the golden calf had to be purged. Only the sons of Aharon were permitted to enter into the most holy place, the throne room of Yahuah. That privilege was limited to one time each year on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur. The Levites represented the firstborn of Israel. The goal was for the firstborn to be in the house, but things were not as Yahuah desired. I'm going to read that first line again. Only the sons of Aharon were permitted to enter into the most holy place, the throne room of Yahuah, and that privilege was limited to one time each year on Yom Kippur. A very, very, very special day, feast day. So what about Adam and Eve? Adam and Eve originally dwelled in the Garden of Eden, paradise. Paradise represents living in the house of Yahuah. Even during the best of times, the Israelites could only visit the courts of the house of Yahuah. They were never allowed inside the house. Only the priests were allowed in, but not as inhabitants or guests, only as servants. See Numbers 3, 8, and 18. Another example, imagine being invited to your father's house for a party, a feast. When you arrive, you bring a gift, but you are only permitted to stand in the front yard. The host, the father, will not permit you into his house. Is this not a bit awkward? And is this a sign of a close, intimate relationship? In fact, many gauge the depth of a friendship on how often you have been inside the person's house. Back to Israel. Was Israel left outside the house because they created the rift through their actions? Did they not profane their vows and cause their own separation? Yahuah will let them visit with him, but he could not and would not let them into his house in their condition. Remember, only the high priest could enter the most holy place, and only once a year, and only in a thick cloud of incense to cover him. In other words, Israel could not be in the presence of a perfect, set-apart Elohim and live. They had to be separated for their own good. And also remember, Yahusha, the firstborn of Yahuah, the high priest according to the order of Melchizedek, has unfettered access to the house. Yahusha willingly came out of the house, that's Yahuwah's kingdom, like the red heifer, to make a way for us to enter into an intimate relationship, a future kingdom entrance with Yahuah. Therefore, all should desire to join with the Messiah and make him their Kohen HaGadol, or high priest. As we walk the covenant path demonstrated through Abram, we begin to see the path of Yahusha the high priest. It was the blood that Messiah as the smoke and fire transversed. This was also the path of the blood of the Messiah that would provide as we find our way back to the house. The types of animals included in the covenant made with Abram reveal the steps in the path, and they are mirrored in the patterns provided in the temple service. See Numbers 15 for that. The path begins with an uncircumcised individual outside of the covenant. We then begin the bloody path with the blood of the heifer, the eglah, the first of the cutting of the covenant. The blood of the red heifer permits us into the camp, and the 7 sprinklings leads us to the house. The next slaughtering in the path of the blood covenant was the goat, described as an azah. We saw the goat at Yom Kippur that provides atonement for sin, Leviticus 16. Once we are made clean and allowed to enter the camp, we receive atonement by the blood of the goat. Next is the blood of the ram, described as an eil. The ram was provided to Abraham during the Akedah in the mountains of Moriah, revealing that the only son of Yahuah would be offered up as the sacrifice of the covenant. You see that in Genesis 11. This was the lamb of Elohim, the seh offering at Passover to redeem the firstborn so that they could live in the house or in the kingdom. When the firstborn are finally redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, they are adopted into the family of Yahuah. And what happens once we are in the house? Once in the house, we approach the final slaughterings, the two birds which totaled 4 wings, representing the cherubim that cover the mercy seat in the most set-apart place. Exodus 25:18. Was the covenant with Abram the pattern? The covenant made with Abram vividly reveals the path to the throne. The heifer blood cleanses, allowing entrance into the kingdom. The goat atones, allowing us to stay in the kingdom, and the ram represents the Lamb of Elohim, redeeming the firstborn, adopting them into his family so that they can dwell in his house. Those who follow the path of blood, following the fire and the smoke, may enter the throne room. The blood of Yahusha fulfilled the patterns provided through all of these slaughterings, and it was his blood that leads us back to Eden, to his throne in the New Jerusalem. Jews today are looking for a red heifer when they should be looking at the Lamb. Summary and conclusion. Let me read that title again. Jews today are looking for a red heifer when they should be looking at Yahushua HaMashiach, the Lamb. Summary and conclusion. Number 1. Hebrew words have been examined, disclosed deep meanings. The mysterious numeric value of the Hebrew word for scarlet, shani, reveals the number 360, and I hope that resonates with everybody that listens to this. 360, a very interesting number of Yahuah and his covenant calendar. 360, that is the number of days we will be going back to so that prophecy can be fulfilled. Number 3, the numeric value of the word para is 285. The first word in the scriptures that has the value of 285 is the city, Ha-Yir, and that is found in Genesis 4:17. Examination of this number shows in Hebrew there is a fruitful city, or a city of first fruits. This was represented by the fact that the Levites belonged to Yahuah. They were given to Yahuah in place of all the firstborn of Yisrael. So it was the first fruits of Yisrael that filled the house of Yahuah. Interestingly, a Levite would cease his work in the tabernacle at the age of 50. By no coincidence, both Adamah, which is ground, and Ha-Adam, the man, share the same value of 50. This number is unmistakably connected with the Jubilee, a time when land and people are restored. This number 50 is also connected with the harvest season. The Torah provides for a 50-day count known as the counting of the Omer. The Omer count encompasses the annual grain harvest connected to the wheat harvest, not a barley harvest, but a wheat harvest. The wheat harvest begins at the house of Yahuah with the Reshit, the first wheat offering, and it concludes at the house of Yahuah with the offering of the Bikurim, or the firstfruits, from all throughout the land. The entire 50-day period is about the harvest and the firstfruits. A story of gematria. The land and man restored through the blood of Messiah to a fruitful city, filled with the firstfruits of the harvest at the Jubilee. city filled with the first fruits. Reasonable and logical assumptions. Yahushua was hung on a tree outside the gate, outside the camp. Hebrews 13:12. There is a strong indication that he was hung on the Mount of Olives at the same site as the Mifkad altar. We're going to be seeing more in that in part 2. He would have been facing the temple, looking to the west, just as was done by the red heifer. Oh boy, more in part 2. Lots in part 2 and 3 coming up on this. The details and details and details. Number 4. This can be surmised due to the account in Mark 15:37-39. And Yahusha cried with a loud voice and gave up the ghost. And the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. And when the centurion which stood over against him saw that he so cried out and gave up the ghost, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of Elohim." And Luke 23:47. Now when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified Yahuah, saying, "Certainly this was a righteous man." Matthew 27:54. Now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Yahusha saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this was the Son of Elohim." The only place this would be possible is outside the camp. And that would be directly across from the temple on the Mount of Olives near the Mifkad altar. Without a doubt, the red heifer sacrifice is about the restoration of creation. The red heifer points to Joseph and represents the Messiah who came out of the house and outside the camp to shed his blood. That blood was sprinkled toward the door of the house. It points to the covenant path that connects the sacrifice with the house. This is the covenant journey represented through the life of Abraham. This very sacrifice, Yahusha's, is critical to cleansing people so they can enter the kingdom and proceed to the house. It cleanses from death, disease, sickness, and death. Without this red heifer sacrifice, the house cannot be filled. The symbolism of the red heifer. The function of this sacrifice and the deep meaning hidden within the commandment clearly point to the Messiah as the means to purification and entrance into the house. He wants his house to be filled with his children, as many as possible. Questions in conclusion. Is it possible King Solomon did not perceive the purpose of the red heifer because he died before the kingdom of Israel was divided and Joseph fell into idolatry? Interestingly, that division was directly related to his own idolatry. Wherefore Yahuah said unto Solomon, "For as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant." That idolatry continued to infect the house of Judah until the temple was first destroyed by the Babylonians in 606 BC, and finally by the Romans in 70 AD. Both the house of Israel and the house of Judah were guilty of idolatry, and both were exiled from the land. This is the end of Red Heifer Part 1. May the Ruach bless you on this day. I look forward to it. I do.